Hey, I'm Marc Balcer. I have been training with SoftEd for a number of years, and I also am a consultant in the world of, modeling, design, business analysis, and yes, I still even write code for a living. Um, One of the things that we're going to be talking about, in fact, the focus of today's presentation really is what does AI mean for those of us who are business analysts and the kinds of things that we do as business analysts? I always like to say that, back, I think it was November, December, or thereabouts, we started hearing about something called ChatGPT. And so naturally, I started playing with that and I kind of typed in just a few things into ChatGPT. And as I said, once I typed those in, once I put in those first few prompts, I knew that what we were going to be doing and what we're doing right now was going to change forever. Okay. Now, you've probably heard a lot of terms. And in fact, in that wonderful, little booklet that we're going to send you as a gift for attending the class, there's a lot of definitions of a lot of terms. One of those terms that you hear about a lot is something called generative AI, right? In fact, when I was first approached by SoftEd about putting together this in a class and so forth on generative AI, it's like, generative AI? Oh, you mean things like ChatGPT and Bing Chat and Google Bard and Perplexity. These are the AI tools that you're hearing so much about that basically allow you to type in a question and get a whole term paper or a thesis out the other end. Well, not that easy. But when you understand what these things are and what they do, how they have been trained on lots and lots of information, you will quickly be able to see how they can really augment your capabilities as a business analyst. Now, one of the things about this particular area is that every time we do a presentation, by the time we put the slides up, something new has happened. So if you, as we go through this presentation, if you think, hey, he didn't mention my favorite, put it in the comments, put it in the chat, because we'll make sure to mention it, learn more about it. That's how we're going to learn a lot of this stuff is, those of us who are not developing the AI tools, but rather using the AI tools, we're going to be learning a lot as things evolve. Okay. So what we're going to do today is we promised you 5 things to make you a better BA, right? I'm not going to do the typical YouTube thing and save the good stuff to the end. I'm going to give you those 5 things right now, because these are going to be at the heart of what's essentially going to be a fairly extensive demonstration of generative AI capabilities in the world of the business analyst. The first of these is the idea of producing artifacts quickly. Now, remember how I said with one prompt typed into ChatGPT, I knew the world was going to change forever? Well, it was things like produce a blank for me. Give me an elevator pitch for this problem. Give me a list of stakeholders for this particular problem. We're going to show you how those kinds of things can be done and how they really help get up over what I call the getting started problem, the problem of, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing, let alone how do I get started with this? So as a result, that's really a big part of what AI is all about. It's really about getting you started. But the other thing that's really useful is the idea that generative AI products can also be research tools. These things have been, as you've probably heard, they've been trained on a lot of material. Some of the vendors of some of the products say, hey, we've trained our product on the whole World Wide Web up till December of 2021 or something like that. In other words, these large language models, as they're called, have basically ingested and learned everything that is on the web. Well, this is huge because of the fact that it provides you not only a tool for doing the work, for producing the artifacts, number one, but also for being able to perform the research, to do the work, to say, I have no idea what one of these things is, whether the thing is an artifact or whether the thing is, some aspect of a problem. I mean, so for example, I'll show you how when you have no idea what a particular problem is, and someone says, oh, well, this is what we're doing, it's more powerful than web searches because it's effectively doing the search for you. Now, one of my favorite things to teach when we teach the BA courses is how to interview and interviewing techniques, how to interview stakeholders, how to really ask the questions and follow up and learn more about a subject matter. Well, building on this idea of artifacts and accelerating research, one of the coolest things I've been able to do with generative AI has been to actually tell it, oh, by the way, you are now a medical physicist. I'm going to interview you about, some aspect of their job that's useful for a product that we're building. In other words, the generative AI tool actually can be the subject matter expert. Now, as we'll see, it can lie, or as they say in our industry, it can have hallucinations. It can make stuff up. All right. So, you don't always want to count on everything that it says, but it's actually a great platform. Number one, if you're learning how to interview, to be able to interview. Number two, it's a great platform for kind of helping to organize your thoughts and get that whole interviewing process more organized so that when you do carry it out, when you do go to interview real stakeholders, you have a much better foundation of what you're looking to try to get. Okay. Now, a lot of what we hear about AI tools as well seems to be in the area of, oh, look, it can produce stuff like, oh, it can produce documents. Well, it can also rapidly generate prototypes and mockups. So for example, one of the things that many BAs find themselves doing is producing some sort of a UI prototype. We're going to give you a quick little demonstration of how you can do that. Now, again, this is one of those areas where by the time we put together the demo, new tools have arisen, right? So be aware that whatever you're doing is good and it's going to get better. And finally, one of the things that always drives us crazy as BAs is we want to create a lot of different artifacts that represent different aspects of a problem. For example, you want to have process models and information models, data models, and and so forth. But how do we keep all those consistent? We introduce a new story. All right, that's going to change the data model, which is going to change the life cycle, which is going to change the process model. Okay. AI goes, I got this. Just ask me for an update. So we're going to show you how that would work. Okay. So as I said, this is all about not just talking, it's about doing. So I went back and I looked at all of our BA or a number of our BA and BA and Agile courses and came up with a list of many of the different artifacts that are created over the course of these classes. And it usually takes, I'd say, the better part of 3 days, to create some of these artifacts. I'm going to show you how we're going to be able to get through all of these in the next 40 minutes. All right. Now, they may not be complete and correct, but again, one of the key notions of generative AI for the business analyst is that it turns you from just being a writer into being a reader and an editor. Right? So instead of having to start with a blank sheet of paper, you now have the ability, or a blank screen, you now have the ability to work with a lot of really good starting information. Okay, so let's go ahead and start this set of demos. And we're going to start by taking a look at one of the projects that we use in some of our classes. So the classic problem that we like to use is a coffee ordering app. And so here we have a particular picture. And we have a particular illustration of a coffee shop and some descriptions and some text. What do I want to do? Okay, I'd like to be able to get a sense of, well, what is a project like this going to look like? Because in fact, the exercise that starts off the course is come up with some sort of an analysis plan for this project. All right, so here's what we're going to do. First of all, I have to copy the text. And so here I have it copied. And now I'm going to go to my ChatGPT. And I'm just going to type in here, give me an analysis plan for this project. All right, just copied it all in. There we go. And so, as you see, it's typing out the result. Now, a couple of weeks ago, someone asked in one of the sessions, why does it seem to pretend to be typing out? Does it really take it that long to think about all this stuff? Or what's going on? I kind of really didn't know, so I just sort of made something up. Hey, I was just being like AI. If I don't know, I'm going to make it up. And I said, well, it gives you time to read what's coming across. So here we see an analysis plan. Wow. Do you think, we had defined all of these things? Do you think if we had been starting at the first day, what this meant? Wow. Okay. So these are a whole lot of different things that could be done or that might be different areas of this particular project. Now, again, that's the kind of thing that's big, high level, highfalutin. Typically, after we do something like that, we will then say, okay, let's give it a simple artifact, like write an elevator pitch. To sell this to Green Mart is the name of the big company, management. Okay. Now, normally, again, when we do this, we'll say, oh, you have 30 minutes to do it. Well, this was more like about 22 seconds that we got this. All right, so I can look at this and I can say, now, instead of having to write something from scratch and send it out and review, okay, now I have something that is useful to be able to, start with, continue, just maybe send out. Or you say, well, wait a minute. When I saw the definition of an elevator pitch, I saw that it was in the form of for blank, looking to blank. Remember it was sort of that crossing the chasm model. They're like, is this going to know about Jeffrey Moore and Crossing the Chasm, a book written in 1992? Yep. Okay. Well, here we go. All right. So he's mentioned all of the, but, I'd still prefer this to be for blank, who blank, our product is a blank. There we go. Now, the way I like to say this is think of this as an incredibly patient personal assistant. In other words, or as one academic once said, a very patient, eager to please graduate student who you can give the job to, and they'll come back. And if they're not right, you can just say, hey, that's not right. Give it to me some other way. Okay. So there's a lot more to the world than just, elevator pitches. All right. In the handout, for example, you'll see that we have, among other things, something referred to as a B5 model. All right. And a B5 model lists actors, events, processes, entities, and objectives. Okay. So let me give this to it. I'm just going to copy out that sentence so you don't have to watch me type. I'm going to come down here. There we go. Now, will this be exactly the same as what's in your book? Could it be a little bit different? Well, one of the interesting things about generative AI is that it does rely upon a little bit of randomness as to where it's going to go and how it's going to approach putting together the problem. Now, this is both, different and maybe a little bit scary, because you can give two groups have two groups take exactly the same question, have them put it into the same agent. That's what we call things like ChatGPT and Claude and so forth. They could put it into the same agent, or they could put it into different agents and get different responses. And of course, that means that as the BA, again, one of our jobs is that of pulling together and compiling the different bits of information that we have. Now, I'll give you a quick hint. You can always take the input from a number of different documents, and in some generative AI tools, you can even say, compare these two documents or compare these two lists and tell me what's missing. You can even take this and say, do you think missing based on your knowledge of the business? Coffee shop. And I hear the comment being written, he's not a very good typist. All right. Okay. So, as we see here, we can now say, well, you've given me some information. Me, the analyst, has provided some information, but I think there might be some additional stuff that you didn't consider. Right? So in other words, the AI agent is able to do the work. It's able to produce the artifacts. It's able to put them in the form that we want. And it's also able to use its own learned knowledge to evaluate what it or another agent have come up with to be able to, perform a review. Okay, now this is really powerful because previously we used to have to rely upon having our subject matter experts available to do this. We'd have to rely upon having a number of other people available in our own teams to make these things happen. We'd have this gnawing uncertainty that maybe we missed something, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, so now we've got a tool, an agent that can actually do this for us. Okay, so after we've gone about doing a number of different initialization activities, and oh, by the way, I mentioned earlier the problem of what do you do if you have no clue? So someone comes to you and says, we want an app for calibrating the beam in a proton therapy system. And you go, huh? What? if the generative AI has been properly trained, you can actually go to the agent and have it provide that information to you. So you can actually, throw those kinds of questions in. Right? Very powerful. Okay. So one of the key areas that we need to work with is who are our stakeholders? And we're going to get up to the point of being able to use the AI as as a stakeholder and interview that particular stakeholder. So to get there, we're going to go through a series of steps with our agent. We're going to use these set of steps to first say, can you give me a list of stakeholders? Now, at some point in time, it could be now, it could be later. You could say, this is a pretty overwhelming list. And I'm looking at this and going, I don't know if this app that we're going to be developing, is involved in local regulatory authorities. So one of the things that generative AI can do, as we'll see, is it can give you a lot of information. Sometimes you have to scale it back. Okay, so which stakeholders are directly involved in the use of the app? Okay, so this is pretty good. So now we can then say, okay, so I'm asking for interview profiles of some of these people. Now, you might recognize these and say, oh, these are personas. Okay. And in fact, I can say, can you turn these with real names? All right. Now, I promised you that we were going to see how we could use this as a tool for interviewing. So let's take on customer-centric Chris. All right. You are customer-centric Chris. I want to you about getting fresh coffee to your customers. All right. So now what Chris has done is Chris has kind of given you an overview. And then we've seen a bit of a interview that is made up, previously, by the way, a few weeks ago when I was putting together the book that you're going to get as a result of this, it answered the same type of question very, very differently. But it was, as you can see, a little bit loquacious in terms of giving its results. So here we have not just the interviewee's response, we have the interviewer. Okay, we can work with all of this. So here's the process. I was going to have to ask separately for a process model, but now I've got a process model. So, okay, so I've got that. I can look at that. Okay, we've got a comprehensive breakdown. I know a question I need to ask. I remember being told that coffee has a shelf life of 3 minutes. How do you guarantee this? And what do you do if this can't be met? Okay, now I need to go take a look at this. I need to say, did you really answer this question? So I will copy this out. Did he say what he can do? Provide, okay, we can provide a fresh replacement. Now, remember earlier, I had mentioned the idea that sometimes AI has what we call hallucinations. It makes stuff up, or it's just generally wrong. So back when a few weeks ago, I had a similar kind of question that I was throwing out at, the agent, and you'll see this in the book, that you get from us. Said, how often does coffee have to be thrown away because it's past the 3-minute limit? And again, this was a slightly different question. I'll copy it just in case, because I think it would be interesting to see this. But you'll notice, for example, offer reheating options. Now, I don't know if any of you are serious coffee drinkers, but one of the things they tell you is don't reheat your coffee. It will get sour. It will get bitter. It will get this. So I said, as a professional barista, do you think reheating coffee is a good idea? And of course, it apologizes for confusion, in all of that. Now, have you ever had a situation where a real SME, a real subject matter expert gets confused and sometimes you as the analyst have to bring him back? Sure. All right. You have to watch out for the same sort of thing when you're dealing with AI. Right? So we are able to converse with our AI and work with our agents as if they are, real people. In fact, I'm going to just throw this question out and see if we get the same response. No. I am going to say that the customer has to arrive in 3 minutes or otherwise they're going to get stale coffee. All right. Now, seriously, we would go through and we would reread all of these things and we would have this kind of information available to us. The value of generative AI, how did I put this the other day? The people who are very successful as BAs using generative AI are also people who have really good interviewing skills. And vice versa, working with generative AI will really help develop those interviewing skills. I found when I was beginning to work with this, and I would take on different subject matters. I'd look at different subject matters that I've been working with in the past, and I would put those subject matters into ChatGPT and others as prompts with the idea that I'm going to try to see what it knows and see how it handles these particular problems. I found myself having questions and having dialogues with ChatGPT very, very, very well, learning a lot. Okay, now one of the things that you also have to be aware of when you're working with generative AI models is that they have a lot of knowledge. And sometimes, as I said, they can get confused. When you ask for artifacts, one of the things that we all have learned as BAs is that, what one organization calls a blank is different from what some other organization calls the same thing. Yes, we have the IIBA. Yes, we have standards bodies. Yes, we have people conducting training courses and writing books and so forth. And we try to come up with common definitions of terms. Because you're going to be working with a lot of artifacts, one of the things that I find is very useful is to make sure that as you come back to this list of artifacts, like you see here, and you see different models and elements and names and so forth that you're going to be working with, it's useful to develop what I call a meta model. In other words, define what's a stakeholder versus what's an actor versus what's a persona. Because AI will use these terms very consistently, but it's also important to make sure that it's using the terms in the form that you're familiar with. If it's not doing it in the form that you're familiar with, you can train it. You can say, we call these things personas versus these other things are actors versus et cetera, et cetera. I've also found that sometimes using the AI tools is very useful for just sort of saying, okay, so what do you think an actor is? And an agent, what do you think an actor is versus a persona? Give me the difference between actors and personas, and see if it matches up with your organization's or your own personal idea of what that is, right? So, it has the ability to both be an authoritative expert, but it also has the ability to learn. Okay, so we've got our actors, we've done our interviewing, we've done all of those things. Let's move on to doing some real work. Okay, so we can come back here to the coffee shop, and I can say, give me a list of the actors and their goals. Right? Because actors and their goals is often a starting point for being able to define different processes. Now, notice it has given me this complete list. Again, do I want to correct it and say, no, I just mean customers, baristas, management, and so forth? No, I'm going to take the whole list here. But I'm going to look at the customer and their goal. And now what I want is I want a process model. I want a description of, walk me through the process of a customer that starts with a customer placing an order and ends with the customer receiving coffee. Okay, so now we can look at, these various stages we have here. All right. So I can look at any one of these particular areas and say, order placement, mobile app ordering, if applicable, order transmission, preparation, tracking, completion, customer pickup, feedback, and loyalty. All right. I'm starting to get the sense that this is a lot of stuff. And if you're anyone who does any sort of agile development, you know about the notion of a minimum viable product or an MVP. Can you reduce this to just what we need in an MVP? Okay. Now, again, I look at some of these things, and if I were doing this as a full-fledged conversation, I would go, I don't think our app is involved in quality control and cleanup. Actually, I will. Again, think about it as the overeager personal assistant, always ready to be, to please you, but sometimes going out of scope. So scope management is a really important part of using AI, right? Again, this is where, as you go through and you have the conversations with your AI agents, it's really important to be able to, pull back on scope, and say, this isn't part of it. Or to sometimes say, hey, I think you forgot about, right? So it says, oh, yeah. Okay, so outline the MVP again. Now, this is another thing that we train people, when being BAs using AI, we train people say that again, just to make sure that it really has understood this. Okay, so now we have, our 6 various stages. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into all of these in detail. However, if you said Agile, you might be thinking user stories. All right, let's drill down into that. For step 1, and again, just to make sure that order placement. So here we go. Now we've got some user stories. Now, again, we see these with numbers on them. If you're doing a larger set of user stories, for example, if you want to do user stories for the entire process model, then what you might want to do is you might want to have it apply some sort of naming or numbering convention to it so that you can refer to all the stories by name or number. Okay, again, now we can say, because we've got a lot of stuff, we can say which of these are most essential. We're effectively getting to the point of putting together it's sometimes called story map, where we put the different steps across the top. We put the different priorities, most important down to least important. We do that. Might call it the Moscow, must have, could have, should have, won't have kind of prioritization scheme as well. So we can put something like that together. Okay. So now I've got this. Now I'd like to be able to write acceptance criteria. Can you give me Now, at the same time, someone might say, well, I'd like to see the ordering process in the form of a use case. All right. And again, it has put together, all of the things like the main flow, the alternate flows, and so forth. Now, use cases are a good foundation for test cases. So again, one of the things that AI is really good for as a BA is taking essentially the same base of content and putting it together in a number of different forms so that we're not, and keeping all of those coordinated. Okay, so here we have our successful order placement. Again, I would probably go through and want to, read these in more detail and make sure that these are good. Let's do a couple more things with test cases. This is very, very useful. Define for a new customer to register to use the app. Now, we haven't seen this before, but we will be needing this as a preconditioned story. Okay, so here we have a series of different test cases. The reason why I wanted to use these is simply because of the fact that this will tee us up for the next things that we're going to do. One of these, of course, is to say, well, I like these test cases, but in Gherkin, given, when, then. I don't know if it's going to accept my misspelling, so I will fix that. Can you write these in Gherkin, given, when, then? Some people like that particular format. Great. Okay. So here it has in Gherkin format. Again, notice that it has actually formatted it as code so that I could pick this up and I could actually put this into a tool that makes use of Gherkin. If I don't like copying out 5 different things, can you write these as one feature file with 5 different scenarios? In other words, feature and scenario are 2 keywords in Gherkin. Rather than copying 5 things out and having to put them together myself, I go, hey, wait a minute, I'm lazy. Let me let my personal assistant, my AI personal assistant, put all of this together into one particular form. And again, you might have a slightly different way in which you would use Gherkin, use given, when, thens for testing purposes. But again, you can nudge it into the format that you want. Okay, so you see the little code blocks. Now, one of the things that people have talked about is the fact that you can give AI the ability to really write code for you for doing things. Now, as I said, I write code for a living, so I am hot and cold on that. Sometimes it is a great assistant, and sometimes it's like, the worst examples on Stack Overflow. In other words, they don't work. But it can be useful even as a BA. Let's say you want a screen prototype. Or a registration screen in HTML with Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a publicly available, it's freely available responsive web framework. Now you might go, but this is code. What am I going to do with that? Well, now again, some people probably have got a product out there that does this, and there are some that you're starting to see out there on the marketplace where people are saying, hey, you just give me a description of the problem and I'll write your whole UI for you. Yes and no. But even with this particular example, I can take this code and go over to something called CodePen, paste it into CodePen, and there we go. There's a page. I could copy this out. I could, use one or several different techniques for copying this out. I've got a UI prototype right here, ready to go. Okay. And I could do the same thing for all of my other screens. I could even come back here and say, this is great. It helps to be nice to it. can you give me a data model? Now, the last time I've done this, it would say, oh, I can't draw diagrams. This time it's actually coming back and going, oh, here's kind of what you want. Okay, now as a data modeling person, I would look at this and I go, okay, this is pretty good. But I'd like this in a format that I can pull into a tool. Can you give me this in YAML format? Okay, YAML is just a very simple human readable modeling form, but you see all of the various elements that we would need. And again, if I have a tool, if I have a diagramming tool that could create an ERD or a class diagram from this, pull it from here, put it into that particular tool. Okay, finally, one last particular thing here, and that has to do with the management of changes. Now, when we come back over here and we look at the UI, we see we have a name, we have an email address, we have a password, but I also need to have a phone number for registration. Oh, can you add the mobile number for registration and keep it with the customer profile? All right. So what it's done is it says, oh, this is now going to be added to the data model. And of course, I could ask it to give me the whole data model so it would update, so I would have a complete thing that I could update. But more importantly, this also changes the registration page. Can you give me that HTML again? So whether this came through a discussion or user story, a bug report or whatever, I had to make some changes, right? So I knew that there would be changes to the data model, that there would be changes to the screen. So I'm going to copy out the screen. I'm going to come back over here to the code pen, erase what's there, paste in the new stuff. There we go. There's the mobile number. Okay. So in short, what you've been able to see is that we've been able to create a lot of artifacts, and those artifacts can be created fairly quickly with knowledge of what it is that we need to produce. We can do a lot of that kind of work very, very, very quickly. We were even able to make changes and regenerate the artifacts. But you can have fun with AI as well. For example, in putting together the material for our training class on AI for BAs, where you get to try to do all these kinds of things in a hands-on setting. One of the things I said was, can you give me a tag cloud for generative AI? There it is. All right. I just simply said, construct a tag cloud consisting of some generative AI vocabulary. And then, of course, as you'll see in the book, I also asked it, oh, give me definitions of all those terms. All right. I want to thank you. I want to leave enough time for questions, but I wanted to thank you all for attending today.
Yeah, this has been great, Mark. This is really exciting information that you're sharing with us all. I'm sure that people are learning a lot, and we have a lot of great questions to get to. And before we do, I just want to say, if this has been interesting and you'd like to dive deeper, we do have an AI day coming up, which is a full day of training. So I put the link in the chat if you're interested in registering for that. It's coming up September 28th, and we have a whole lineup of awesome speakers there. Marc is one of them, and we're going to be getting into all kinds of aspects of AI for SDLC professionals. So it's really geared towards project managers and business analysts and those of you working in software projects about using AI specifically within that domain. So I'd love to have you join. The link's there in the chat. You can register there through IIBA. The Bluegrass chapter is one of our sponsors there. And so let's dive into some questions. I think we still have time to get to all these. We've got some great questions here. And would you like me to read them out to you, Marc, or can you?
Yes, just go ahead and read them out one by one.
Okay, great. Well, the first one we have is talking about this sort of usage is what I would consider cheating, quote unquote. It means you're not good enough at your job to do it yourself. It's like using a calculator to solve a math problem that you cannot solve yourself because you do not understand the underlying concepts. So that is I guess that's more of a comment than a question, but
I love that comment. I love that because look, speaking about the calculators, I was around back when they argued in high schools whether or not you should be allowed to use calculators or still forced to use a slide rule. Okay. Now, let me put it to you this way. There is a way to learn writing, like just ordinary human writing, called from reading to writing, where the theory behind this approach is that the best way to be a good writer is to learn to be a good reader. In other words, in this particular kind of a model, you start with reading someone else's work and essentially following the modeling that style or modeling that structure to create your own. And one of the things that you do in that particular style of learning how to write is you begin by modeling it, but then you also learn how to critique other writing. Now, to the folks who argued, and again, the reason why I got into this was because of just that very argument, and the fact that I had family members who were, English teachers, writing teachers, reading specialists, all of those things, who had that model of from reading to writing. I assert that if you bring this in and have your junior BAs using this approach, you want to make sure that they are learning how to critique what is produced, okay? That it's not just a matter of, oh, you take this and you copy this. You have to go back and, we don't have the time in an hour to sit here and dissect everything that the AI gave us. But that's why I pulled out that example of, oh, you could reheat the coffee. No, you can't reheat the coffee. Now, how do I know that? All right.
Exactly. You have to have that foundational knowledge in order to be able to edit and to cross-check. So
that's right.
That's a great response. So we've got about 10 more questions. So let's do a rapid fire here, Marc.
Okay.
If we can knock these out.
It can accelerate BA tasks and daily work, but what negative aspects may it provide for BAs in the future? We don't think. All right. Tied back to the last question. Negative aspect, we don't think. All right. Are there any copyright issues with using what an AI agent like ChatGPT gives you? Interesting. And I think that what I have been doing is I've been following professional societies like the IEEE and so forth and saying, how do you cite references that you create through ChatGPT? Okay. How do you cite those kinds of references? We're not going to bury this stuff. We're not going to make it go away. One of the things that is often useful is that there are some tools like Perplexity AI that actually give you references. When I'm going and putting together anything, using this to put together something that has real value to it, I will typically put it into Perplexity and say, give me references. And then I just go ahead and check and then cite the appropriate references. Can you give an example of how one would apply ChatGPT to an internal company enhancement project? Okay, there are two things that are happening right now. And again, I think you want to follow this based on the size of your organization, translated how much money you have to spend, and the kind of proprietary nature of what you're working on. Some companies, for example, have banned all access to generative AI for the fear of it leaking out proprietary information, or just the fact that you're asking these questions reveals certain things. There are tools that are emerging. There are platforms that are emerging that allow you to self-host various AI models. You hear about things like private GPT, Llama, and so forth. And so if you're really interested in that, I would ask you to investigate that. That's something that I'm in the process of doing right now. And so, watch this channel. We'll have some answers on that. But I think the important thing is, yes, it can leak information, so be careful about that. Do you think the BA's role in the project may be completely replaced by advanced AI in the future? As a writer and as a doer of boring, repetitive tasks, yes. As a thinker and a strategist, no. We're still at the point where AI is that eager assistant, too willing to please. Okay, and so we still need to supervise it. As ChatGPT provides ready-made answers, won't we lose our analysis skills? No, I think your analysis skills will get better because you're going to move from being a writer to an editor. Okay, and that's the key thing. You're not going to be simply cranking stuff out. You're going to be reading and reviewing and critiquing and doing all of that editing work. About how long did it take to train your AI assistant? 0. The AI assistants I'm using are the publicly available. I purposely only used the publicly available ChatGPT in today's demo. That you can just look up ChatGPT, you can get a free account, and you can do the same sorts of things there. Any general advice for how to tell if information is not accurate, especially if you're not the subject matter expert? Yes. 1, find a subject matter expert. Number 2, if you don't have a subject matter expert, make use of a multitude of AI agents. In other words, I have, in my toolbar, I've got ChatGPT, I've got Claude by Anthropic, Bing Chat, Perplexity AI. I have a number of those different agents. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll take a response from one, I'll put it into the other and say, does this make sense? For example, as I was putting together the course on generative AI for BAs, I would take the objectives. I'd take an exercise that I put together. I'd put the objectives and so forth into one tool. I'd put it into another tool, and I'd look for the comparison. I'd ask it, what do you think about this? It's kind of almost like having a panel of experts available to you, but none of them are going to be the authority. I think you still are going to be the authority. So, again, I would, I'd kind of turn that question back around and say, how would you know that somebody was not the authority or not giving you an authoritative answer if you were talking to real subject matter experts? Okay, one more down here. How do you handle using generative AI as a BA for a client who doesn't allow AI in their environment? Well, I can give you the persuasive answer. I can give you the cheating answer. The cheating answer is, well, that's why if you are a consultant, you have an agreement with them, you make it very clear that, okay, you're not going to allow access through your firewall, but we may want to make use of this for specific purposes. What information do you consider proprietary versus what information is generally available. You want to have the discussion with them about it. Because if you're not using it, they're not using it, somebody else, some other competitor will be. And so, like with all technologies, we go through that cycle where, I mean, again, I remember 1997, 98, the web was starting to become really big for business. But at the same time, there were companies who would absolutely positively not permit internet access. And these were big financial firms and so forth. They had their good reasons. But at the same time, we want to understand that this is, the genie is not going to go back in the bottle. And rather than fearing it, we should be looking at it and going, how can we make best use of it for our own purposes?
Well, that's a great point to end on, Marc. And we so appreciate your time today and all of the insights you've shared. It's been really fun seeing the live demos as well. And just a reminder for everyone, we'll be sending out a recording along with the resource guide that Marc put together. And check us out for AI Day if you're able to attend. We're also, as part of the ticket to that, we'll send the recording. So if you're not available that date, just know that recordings are being sent out as well as a big resource guide for that day of training as well. So send us any questions you may have. Please do not hesitate to reach out with your feedback on this webinar. It always helps us as we plan future topics. But I will let everyone go and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, Marc, and thanks everyone for.
Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you again. All right. Bye-bye.